We're here today to talk about the 5 secrets to attracting the best talent and creating a high-performing culture in your workplace. Now, I'll bet you've heard of some of these secrets before, but my guess is you've never heard them quite like this, nor in a way that works together to create that high-performing team. But first, here we are at the InvestOps conference in Tampa. What a great location, isn't it? How many of you brought family along or took a few days to yourself during this trip? Well, it's a really great city. My husband and I used to come here frequently when we lived in Philadelphia to escape the cold. While you're here, you're never really disconnected, are you? The emails keep coming, the calls keep coming, the texts keep coming. I remember when I worked at Vanguard and other banks in the investment industry, the texts, the emails, they just kept coming in no matter where I was, especially when you're out of the office on business. How many of you here have a trusted person back at the office running things so that you can be here? Yeah, I've had some great backups during my career. Some that I trusted so fully that I just can't imagine getting the job done without them. Well, this is Sarah. She's your trusted backup. She looks a little concerned in this slide because she's going to have a serious conversation with you when you return. You see, Sarah's about to resign. She wasn't out there looking for a position. She was headhunted. She's got a profile out there on LinkedIn, and a recruiter saw it and gave her a call. And for whatever reason, she took the call. She wasn't unhappy with you. She wasn't unhappy with the work. She wasn't looking. But when she took the call and went for the interview, it resulted in a dream job offer. She just can't walk away from it. And so she'll be starting with them in 2 weeks. What a hit to you personally and to the team. Sarah was like 93% of people who, when they leave a job, actually leave the company. It's interesting. We have these great posting systems out there trying to keep people so many great opportunities within our companies, and yet people still go out and find work elsewhere. 55% of people said that they stayed longer working in positions where they weren't as happy as Sarah was just because they like the people they work with. So really, it's the human connections that keep people engaged and at work. Now, you're a good leader, so you've been building a bench of people behind Sarah, just like you developed her. But none of them's quite ready to step into her role yet. So you entertain an idea about going out to the job market to look for her successor. Maybe it's time to add some new blood or get some new energy and thought leadership into your team. So you connect your internal recruiter and you start making plans to fill her role. As you go out to today's job market, what can you expect? When you get out there, here's what you'll find. Back in 2009, during the recession, the ratio of job seekers to open positions was about 6.6 to 1. We had a lot of people to choose from. Now, it's nearly 1 to 1. You're looking for that needle in a haystack to fill your position. And this impacts the days that it will take you to fill the position. Right now, stats say that it's about 46 days, but I think that seems optimistic. I used to do this work, and I know that it takes longer than what we think it takes. So probably your recruiter will do what the recruiter did that found Sarah. They'll go out to LinkedIn and check around. They'll make some phone calls. They'll do some external recruiting and sourcing for you. And as you interview her replacement and that person gives notice, it's starting to look like 2-3 months minimum till you get someone in her slot to start working for you. So that's a real hit to you and your team. What will it cost you to replace Sarah? Well, it's not just the salary that we need to consider. It's the recruiting cost, the training, the ramp up time, the drag on other people's time to train the new hire, the drag on your time to train and mentor. So how many of you think that about 16% of salary is about right? I see heads shaking no. You're right. 16% would be for those who are hourly and unskilled. But Sarah is neither one of those. She's highly skilled and she's salaried. So to replace her, it'll be closer to 213%. And depending on how highly skilled she is, it could go up to 400% of salary, depending on what data source you use. By the way, that new person won't get up to speed in a week either. It takes up to 2 full years to reach full productivity. Sarah's been with you 4 years, so you can see again what the impact will be to you. Well, now that we're out there in the job market, here's what people are looking for today. These are very fresh statistics. Besides an equal and fair salary, which is always a good place to start, people are looking for more benefits and perks. Even the millennial generation is looking for more benefits and perks, especially once they're in a role. Everybody's looking for different things. So this is where it comes down to the conversations that you have one-on-one to know what each one is looking for in order to remain engaged and stay working with you. One of the most important things is work-life balance. Now, you and I know that there's not a lot of balance. That makes it sound very even. I prefer to call it work-life integration. How do we manage it all and still have times for the things that make us happy and the other things that are important to us that we need to manage in our lives? And by the way, this was important to men and women alike. It was skewed a little bit toward female, but not statistically significantly. So there's no substantial difference between the genders wanting work-life balance. And the other thing they really want is an opportunity to learn and grow and a manager who's invested in that, especially those that are just coming into the workforce. Now, another word about the millennial generation. They're in their mid-30s and have been with us for 15 years. It's probably time we stop talking about them. But there is another generation coming in behind them, also known as Gen Z or iGen. They are now entering the workplace, and we'll wait and see what it is that they want. For those of us that have the white hair or maybe no hair, you might remember what it was like to work during our early years. It's a time to explore and see what work you like and what else interests you. Engagement numbers, by the way, when you come into the workforce, you're all excited, they're high, and then it goes pfft. And then as we age, engagement numbers go up, which is kind of interesting to think about. We also want salary transparency much more these days. Remember when it was like verboten to talk about your salary? You could not talk about it, it could get you fired. Well, now they want it right out in the open. As a matter of fact, again, men and women alike are unlikely to apply if they find out that the salaries are unequal. And they're looking for very visible signs of inclusion. So that's a little bit different too. It's not just about diversity. I know I think her name is Brene Watson, who writes about diversity, says that diversity is when you're asked to the party, but inclusion is when you're asked to dance. So are you asking everybody to dance and be included in things? They're really looking for signs of that. This is Malcolm. He's Sarah's replacement. You went through the whole process. He's going to come on board with you in a couple of weeks. How do you get him up to speed faster than 2 years? Well, again, the best practices show that you're going to need a comprehensive training plan. Easy for me to say. That's where I ended up in my financial career, was over on that learning and development side and the leadership development side. And there's actually a payoff to this, which I'll show you in a second. But the statistics say that only 10% of Malcolm's training is going to come from formal classroom or online or whatever methodology, formal training. 90% of it is going to be done on the job, by challenging assignments, by one-on-one, and by personal reflection. So there's a payoff to your company when you actually put money and time into training. And we know that if you spend at least $1,500 per employee on training, the average is that you're going to get a 24% higher profit margin. You know, there's a funny thing out there where they say, what happens if we train them and they leave? And the other thing is, well, what happens if we don't and they stay? So it's just kind of a remember that when you're thinking about that. I always supported or worked in operations units. I know what it's like to have to get the work done and have to send an employee off to training or have to have somebody tail along. It's always that, you know, how do I balance that? So what the AMA says is that one-on-one coaching and mentoring is going to get the biggest bang for the buck. That's going to take your time, and it's going to take time for the people on your team. So think about the impact of that recruiter calling Sarah and how she decided to take the call, and here we are, down the road. So let's talk about those 5 secrets. It's really about connection and alignment. And so the first thing is, this is called the Aligned at Work model. My company's name is Aligned at Work. We really help you with the people problems so they don't become profit problems. This is our model. This is what we've learned from working with a lot of people over a long time, is that when we talk about vocation, people want work that really energizes them. And a lot of us don't give that conscious thought as to what is sucking the life out of me and what is making me kind of excited to where time passes quickly. When we figure that out, it's pretty amazing.
We also want to work at companies and for work groups where the culture and the values fit us, because if you've ever had, let's say that I hope everybody in here is highly ethical, maybe not compared to what we heard in the last talk about what the world thinks. But if you are highly ethical and somebody asks you to sort of fudge some numbers or make it look this way, that wears on you. And a lot of us have that in our background somewhere where we were kind of asked to, or it was implied that we needed to do something different than what we were doing. And we increasingly hear that people want work that has higher meaning and purpose to it. And that's across all generations. So what do you, the leader, do about that? Here's some things you can do. Encourage role experimentation. When I was in the fund accounting group and supporting them, we sometimes found that the people who came in who were highly educated, they were good at their jobs, but they did not love sitting with their head down and focusing. They wanted to get up and roam and talk to people. They made the best trainers. They knew the work. They liked the people interaction. It was a beautiful blend. So I had a lot of interns come over and try out training and see if it really was what they thought it was and whether they could do that full time. A few of them did. Some went on to more client-facing roles. So how do you keep them for the company if not for you? And of course, I like to think it's a natural to treat people with respect and equality and inclusion and all those kinds of things, but it's a constant reminder that we have to do it, because no matter how good we are as leaders, sometimes we don't get it right every time. I've led teams a long time, and what works for one does not work for the next one. You think you're doing it right, you have the best of intentions, and it goes off the rails. We also want to pay them fairly, of course, but when you remember back to that, they want the benefits and the perks. We don't really know what that is if we don't ask them. And a lot of time for me, I figured out along the way that it wasn't necessarily about that $25 gift card. That was nice. They'd rather have a day off to do what they wanted to do. So what is it for each person, and how do they want you to kind of meet them where they are? And then lead them by their strengths for higher engagement. So Vanguard went through a whole thing with strength finders, and some of you probably have used strength finders. We went through that after a while, and then when I was at Wells Fargo, they also used it heavily. And I figured out along the way, I had my two best bosses in my last 20 years, and both of them had figured out some way to lead me by my strengths without really reading about how to do it. So I believe in connectedness, so they let me go out and dabble in other areas of the division and do the kind of work that I do, and that kept me happy. And one day I read the back of the Strength Finders and found out, hey, that's one of the strategies in there. So there are a lot of good tools out there to help you lead people by their strengths. The second secret is about the relationships. Now, I mentioned that people will stay longer if they're really happy with people. I also found this random statistic that said that a lot of people who felt that there were remote workers or people working virtually felt bullied by them or something, or if 30% of people felt bullied by people who weren't with them. I think that's possibly because we don't see each other face to face. But when we have to work with people, that's a big, big thing for us, is really getting those human relationships and sense of community. We want a leader that cares about us because that motivates us to do our very best. We want to celebrate together and work on a common mission. That really bonds people. A lot of the work that we do in Aligned at Work with teams has to do with figuring out what that common mission is, so everybody knows and gets synced up and moves forward together. So what do you do about it? Well, spending one-on-one time with them. How many of you use formal one-on-ones? You have a specific time for each person every month, or it might be in your system that way? I was actually just working with a lumber company, and they don't do formal one-on-ones, but they do a lot of go out to lunches together. So they're accomplishing it in a different way than what I experienced it in the financial industry, but they're still having that face time and that one-on-one conversation. And use it to talk development and future goals and really where they want to get, because often it devolves into status reports and how you doing on this and how you doing on that. And it stays there. It doesn't actually get over to the, so what about you, the human? And this is all about the human connection. We want to create community among the team members and build that psychological safety. We heard that term a couple times yesterday. We want to make sure that people trust each other. And that takes some overt work a lot of times. You can get there faster if you make it overt versus waiting for it to happen. and then use that common mission to unite and connect people. The next one is finances. So here we are, a bunch of financial people. But here's the thing, finances hold a lot of power over us. So many of us stay in jobs or relationships or situations where we stay longer than we need to because we think we have to, because we need the money or we need the benefits or whatever it happens to be. So finances are very individualized, and a lot of the mindset comes from how we were raised and the messages around us. If I'm, in my 20s and I come into the workplace, it's probably what mom and dad told me, then what I experienced in college, and now my peers around me. If they're all chasing money, then I'm going to chase money too. I'm going to find myself in those situations. And so be it. But mindset is really, really important. Is there ever enough? And then it's the practical financial skills. So even though we are all employ these highly intelligent, smart, educated people, do they know the basics about how to do it for themselves? Because I found out sometimes there's a disconnect there between what I can do for my clients and what I do for my job and what I'm doing to set myself up for the future. And again, I mentioned that they hold power over us. So what can you, the leader, do? One of the best things I got many good things from Vanguard. One of the best things I got from Vanguard was they believe that since we built wealth for our clients, that we ought to have that same set of resources for the crew members. I have to remember that it was crew way back then. So the crew members could go to these, you could go to how to build for education, how to buy a house. I went to the pre-retirement ones. Now, I was in my 40s when I started there, but I went to the pre-retirement ones because I could see that coming, and I want to make sure I was ready for it. By doing what they told me to do, I set myself up so that when I finally did my own business in 2015, I was running it part-time as a side gig, but I went full-time into it in 2015, I was set up financially, so it wasn't going to break the bank or drain the 401k. And I waited a long time to get to that point, but I put the money away, sat down with a financial advisor, and he said, go. And so there we were. So I just followed it. And if you can offer some kind of resources to people, it's amazing. But then encourage them to do their due diligence because, it's your money. So you want to make sure that you can really trust them. The other thing that I was able to do was help my own employees understand their 401k. I remember pulling my 24-year-old employee who was, he was more of an hourly kind of a, like run the mail kind of a guy. And he had no idea what the 401k was about. So I pulled him into a room, showed him mine, and said, this is how you get there. And got him into it. Now he'd be automatically enrolled these days, but got him into it and said, just put a % a year in, just one step up at a time. You won't miss 1%. Set it on autopilot so you don't have to worry about it. And I've lost track of him, but he got started. And anything that you get started, the younger you are, the better it is. So those are things that you can do as the leader. Now, well-being is the next secret. We want to be healthy, happy, and successful. But again, each of us defines that our own way. So what is it? And again, success oftentimes comes from how we were raised, what messages we got from the communities that we were in. And at some point in life, I had a conversation with somebody here that oftentimes that age is 40, where we've sort of experimented with our career and we've experimented with life, and then we go, is this all there is? And 40 seems to be, 40, 45 is oftentimes the wake-up call to where we are sitting back and going, what is it really? And so this is really about helping people understand that health, happiness, and success is within them, not necessarily for you to provide it for them, but you can have conversations that sort of set them on that path. Oftentimes it's that well-asked question rather than telling them what to do. Most of us want to tell them what to do because you can see them going off the rails. And it's not necessarily that. It's asking that good, empowering question that gets them to really look at it differently and give it some conscious thought. Again, psychological safety comes up here. A healthy work environment. One thing I experienced in the operations groups of places was that we grind the work out. And we just put our heads down, we come in early, we stay late, keep going. People eat at their desks. I can never do that. I was like, I got to get a break, or I can't focus in the afternoon. But what the stats show us is that if we take the break, if we take the vacation, if we disconnect, we're actually more effective. But in the moment, it's just put the head down, I'm just going to stay and work my way through it. And I remember having a conversation with a manager that worked for me and saying, you're putting in some really long hours. She's like, this is how I do it. And I said, it's not sustainable. Your health is going to suffer. Your mental state is going to suffer. So just get an end date to when you're going to stop this, because it was a new job for her, and this was what she did. And her husband was saying the same thing to her at home. Honey, I know you're like this, but you can't keep this up. So what's your end date for when you're going to kind of give yourself some space? What can you do? Creating psychological safety for your team, obviously, and that's all about that trust factor. How do you get them to work together in ways that cause that trust to get built quickly? And then help them understand their own definitions. And of course, the respectful treatment of people, the inclusion, it keeps coming back. If you can give them flexibility, give it. If you can give them remote work, at least from time to time, give it. A lot of times we have the power to do that, but we haven't done it before. And we're used to everybody coming into one place. So there's lots of ways that you can have impact on that. And spirit is the last one. Now, oftentimes when I introduce this, people take it as religion. And I usually say, it's not about religion, but it might be for you. So if that's who you are authentically, then that is what it is for you. But if not, can you bring who you really are to the office? Now, in my day, as you can see, I've been around for a while. In my day, we had to wear the suits, and I certainly couldn't dress like this for the office, and all of those things. I had to look a certain way, I had to act a certain way. And if you got out of that, then you were chastised and disciplined, and you were told, we don't dress like that, we don't do that thing. These days, people want to bring who they are. I remember, the first tattoos and the first piercings, and some companies probably still don't permit that to be visible. But what difference does it make in the grand scheme of things? So, although it might not be for me, it might be for the new people who are coming in working for you. And with this, it's about being authentically you, the leader, too. They need to see who you are. They need to be able to understand what you stand for. And leading yourself and having that self-awareness before you go out and lead others. I wish I'd known that at 24 when I got promoted the first time. But the self-awareness came later. Didn't mean I wasn't managing people. I was. But the self-awareness came with time. And then understanding that we are all connected. So what happens to one affects the other one on some level. And what can you do as the leader? You can allow people to be who they are to the greatest extent, to really think about that, to work on your own inner leader, which takes pulling out time and reflection. And we don't like to hear that these days because we want our training and our leadership development faster, remote, virtual. I just want to do an e-learning. Okay. You'll get what you get when you put in the time the way you put it in. So work on your inner leader. Hire people who are different to round out the team. People who don't think like you. People who don't look like you. And then figure out ways to include them. It'll take some steps to do that. And most of you probably have very highly diverse teams, I would think. And include everyone, not just the select few. I've worked at places where you could tell if you were on the list versus not on the list. And people know that and feel it. And that's that disengagement factor that comes up really fast when that happens. So those are the 5 secrets. There they are again. And if you liked this, hot off the presses, like literally Saturday, this thing went up on Amazon. So I wrote a workbook that has these 5 things in there. And what's in the back is leader guides. What I experienced as a trainer is a lot of times team leaders struggle with, what do I do for the next meeting? How do I grow people? All that kind of thing. So what this is about a 45-page workbook where they work through those 5 things for themselves. And then you or somebody else goes to the back and says, okay, we want to work on vocation. What's the activity? And they go about 30 to 60 minutes. So that's out there. We're going to give 10 of them away. Joe's standing by the side there. This is the salesy part. Joe's standing by the side there. So if you hand him your card, or you go online, or you go on your phone right now and you text the word aligned to 42828, you'll be in the drawing for the 10 books, there will be 10 individual books given out, by the way, not all 10 to one person. You do need to buy them for each person on your team. They are copyrighted. But if you get on that or give him your card, you will be getting a note by the end of the week that not only has the slides, but has our favorite statistics sources in it for engagement and all those kinds of things. So again, you either give him a card or do this right now. And before I end, there's our contact information if you want to snap a picture of that, or again, we're going to be around so you can get our cards. And last but not least, I always like to end with a Steve Jobs quote. And it is this: your work is going to fill a large part of your life, and the only way to be truly satisfied is to do what you believe is great work. And the only way to do great work is to love what you do. If you haven't found it yet, keep looking, don't settle. Because as all with all matters of the heart, you'll know it when you find it. And what I wish for you is that you find it, or you've already found it, and that you help the people that work for you do the same. Thank you.
I was going to say we do have time for one quick question. If anybody in the audience
What's that one?
Sorry.
No, that's okay. You
Okay.
go, and we'll go quick to him.
Okay,
I think we
so
got
sorry. So one of the things that came up yesterday in our lunches was how to pull people up from within, and I think that we've identified a big discrepancy or a gap where if you're hiring from outside, the salary is much higher.
Yes.
And when you're hiring from within, the person doesn't get to experience that increase in their base.
Yep.
And so how do you, or how can we as leaders, and also, for selfish reasons, right?
Mm-hmm.
If we like where we're working and if we think that the person likes where they're working, how do we, try to negotiate that kind of thing? Like, what do you suggest?
Yeah.
Because, if I like somewhere, I'd like to stay there, but, you need to make some money.
Yep.
So.
Yeah, I've probably never worked less than 4 or 5 years at a place, and then I've gone as long as 13. So I don't tend to job hop, but I do know that accelerated my salary over time. Remember that you can negotiate within just as much as you can negotiate from without. I did find that probably of all, I was in savings and loans, then Vanguard, then Wells Fargo. Found out that Vanguard had the most tight system on, it only happens here and this is how it goes, and there's not a lot of negotiation. And that's a lot harder to work in. I don't have a magic answer for that, but I'd say keep pushing it. Keep pushing the envelope a little bit there. I do know that in other places I worked, there were off-cycle promotions and off-cycle raises given. And it's true. I mean, you can try to make it as good as possible and make it, we talk total comp and we talk about benefits and perks and all those things. Sometimes you can give the flexibility that the person wants and they're kind of afraid to leave. But then as a career coach, I'd tell them, go test the system. So yeah, it's a problem I don't have a magic answer for.